gives and God takes away. Blessed be the name of God. Omer Krav Amar Ma'ekra Kol HaBasar Chatzir L'Chol Chasto Ketzitz HaSadeh Yavesh Chatzir Novel Tzitz Ki Ruach Adonai Nashvelo Achein Chatzir Ha'am Yavesh Chatzir Novel Tzitz U'Devar Eloheinu Yakul Le'olam. A voice says, cry out, but I ask, what shall I cry? All flesh is like grass, all of its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers and the flower fades when a wind from God blows upon it. Surely, therefore, people are like grass. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of God endures forever. LeDavid Mizmor, LeDonai Haaretz U'Moat Tevel V'Yoshveva, Ki Hu Al Yamim Yisada Ve'al Na'orot Yifadaneha. Mi Ya'aleh Bahar Adonai, U'mi Yankum Bimkom Kodsho, Niki Chapayim U'Bar Levav, Asher Lo Nasa Lashav Nafshi V'Lo Nishba L'Mirma. The earth is the Lord's, with all of its fullness. The world is the Lord's, with all of its inhabitants. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in the holy place? She who has clean hands and a pure heart. She will receive a blessing from the Lord and a just reward from the God of deliverance. To Mark and Ben and to the rest of the family, the word we heard a lot about yesterday during all the national ceremonies was the word protocol. We kept talking about the protocol for Inauguration Day, protocol for national gatherings, and there's a protocol, a conventional way of doing things. There's a protocol to religious gatherings. It's the way things are handled. It's the way things are handled and carried out. It's the way we expect things to be done. High school graduations have a protocol, college graduation, even attending sports games or traveling on an airplane, or even how you set a table for dinner. Your mother, your grandmother, certainly believed in protocol. She had very strong ideas, in fact, about the way things should be done. She was very precise. She was very meticulous. That was her protocol. Implementing, following the protocol is very important, or the right way to perform time-honored activities is important. You know this. She believed in manners, and she believed in structure, and in the right way. Calculating the right placements on the dining room table was a science. It's the way things should be done. Those moments weren't haphazard for her, they weren't casual. It was choreographed. Just like there was a protocol to going to school and the school dress codes, which you understood very well. And even if the school dress code didn't require certain things, Mark, you still had to negotiate with the Charlotte Kramer dress code, which was often a much higher dress code. Some people come home, I know, from their day and they take off their tie. You come home and put on your tie. The way of doing things, our belief in the right way things should be done, wasn't just about dinner parties. It wasn't just about entertaining. It wasn't about only how you dress for school. Her protocol was about reaching out to help the community. That was her protocol. Her protocol was about the importance of education. Her protocol was about the importance of yes. I think Charlotte would say the right issues, of course. Her convictions were strong, yes. Her opinions firm, yes. But her will and her determination, her energy, her results were most impressive. She was raised with the ethic that yes, we should be improving our corner of the world. That we can and we should work on behalf of the betterment of other people. And that it can be done. There was an inherent optimism in the causes that Charlotte worked on, a belief that yes, we can and will get it done. That those with resources should reach out to those who don't have them. And indeed that it was the right thing to do. Providing full college tuition to those who signed on to her program with her high school program, her work, League of Women Voters, Playhouse Square, the orchestra, the assortment of causes that were pursued through her work and her leadership of the Family Foundation. She believed in the correctness of these causes. I have a dream. It's the name of a wonderful speech. It's also the name of her program, sponsoring college for these students. And I think it's an appropriate theme for much of what your mother did. I have a dream is one way to describe the kinds of things she did. I think mitzvah is another word. She wanted to do a mitzvah for people. In her own way, she knew that the heart of Judaism and Jewishness is in the deed. It's in the accomplishment. It's in the effort and in the fulfillment of that effort. It's in the result. It's in the benefit that occurs to the recipient of the good deed, and also the good feeling and the character it builds in the doer of the good deed. In her own way, she knew that that was the heart of the Jewish faith, and that all of us should be grateful for our good fortune and then be able to help those who bless. That's just what we're supposed to do. It is the Jewish protocol. I think she understood that. I think she learned that from her parents. Samuel and St. Paul, some of the founders of her synagogue. Her father was extremely involved in Jewish education, and she was extremely close to her father. Both mother and father were very significant influences on her life and who she became. Their portraits prominently featured in her home and in her mindset and in her deeds. I think she and Leighton were both raised to respect their parents and the ideals of their parents. I was actually always inspired by the importance that Jewish identity and Jewishness played in both her life and Leighton's. Mark, you told me how tremendously important that Leighton was to her, their relationship, their familial ties, and how they respected each other. I know High Holy Days and Passover were spent together. During my early years here, Leighton would come to Shabbat morning services several times a month. And your mother was there as a regular attendee really until she couldn't hear well enough and couldn't physically come. For many years. She was always out there in the deep center section, deep center field, way back. And she was very clearly attached and comfortable in the service. She would come up to me afterwards on many occasions to say hello and to speak about the specifics of the service, about the topic, about the music, about the sound system. I know she was very instinctively supportive of you learning Hebrew. She wanted it done, whether in a school situation or through tutoring. She wanted to make sure it became part of your life. And she was a fan of conservative Judaism. And obviously your family has been a staple of its legacy. Your parents shared many of the same values. They enjoyed being with each other. They enjoyed entertaining, socializing with their friends. They had met. Your mom was an undergrad in Ann Arbor. Your dad a law student. Your dad, the quieter of the two, but both devoted to each other, and they understood each other. They understood who each other was. After your dad passed, she and Leonard were introduced. They had a very good, sustaining relationship for many years. Really approximately the same amount of time as your parents did. They cared for each other as they reached their more vulnerable and fragile years together. You know, I must say that in my first year here, my wife Ilan and I had been year, part of our first year, we received the invitation for dinner at Charlotte's home. And it was everything you described. Elegantly set up, flawlessly presented, delicious food, there was conversation, there were party games, which were fun. Not formal at that point at all. We had a nice time and a wonderful feeling afterwards. And yes, indeed, she mounted a 10-year crusade for better audio help in the sanctuary. And I saw some of that forcefulness. She was not always pleased. We did improve it at her initiative, but it was also at a time when her own hearing was becoming weaker. We'd improve it, but it wasn't solving the entire problem. The fact that she derived such comfort from the Shema in this last period of her life, which you shared, is totally in keeping with the way she abided by and respected the tradition and the values of the Jewish faith. I want you to know I liked her. I had an affection for your mom, as I did your uncle. Both of them had a certain fire in their bellies. They're both somewhat intimidating at times, but both had these areas where you could access them and find such great warmth and such great kindness. In the end, your mother was a woman of inexhaustible energy. She was busy and she needed to be busy. She was forceful and at times a commanding type of person. She was also very gracious, very courteous, and charming in social settings. She was shaped by her upbringing, and I think she was always mindful to honor the legacy of her parents and her family in what she did in life. I think she felt she was bringing them honor in what she did. As she had a family, as she gave of her time, her causes, and in being loyal to both the American and Jewish ethic. I think she felt she was honoring her parents. To have such a determined person with such clearly envisioned and specific goals as your mother could not have been always so easy. But I know you see her as a role model, as an example for good works and doing the right thing, as a strong influence on your life. Let's put it this way, your son sure seems to think you have a certain meticulousness when it comes to certain notions of the right way of doing things. But you also give him the space to be himself. Your mom was always prepared. She was totally prepared every day, mentally and in physical appearance, always meticulously dressed for the day's events. She woke up each day ready. I just want to add, I remember, you told me this, but I remember from your first dinner party, she always liked chocolate something. And because she was always so prepared, I always had this fantasy of what would happen if that chocolate spilled on one of those perfect outfits. I didn't know what happened. I don't know that it ever happened, but I'm sure if it had happened, I know that Charlotte Kramer would have figured out a way to fix it. She lived with the good name, and she died with the good name.
Thank you, Rabbi. And thank you for being here in the cold. Thank you for being here virtually. I appreciated your comments. I may repeat a few because they were accurate. There's a proverb that is part of the evening prayers on Friday night. Eshat Chayal, a woman of valor. And there are a few phrases in that song that seem very apt for my mother. Who can find a woman of valor, for her worth is far above rubies? She stretches out her hand to the poor and the needy. Strength and dignity are her clothing. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the law of kindness is on her tongue. Her children rise up and call her blessed. A woman that fears the Lord shall be praised, and her work shall honor her at the gates of heaven. My mother was an elegant, gracious, and energetic lady. She was always perfectly dressed and perfectly coiffed. She had nearly 95 years when she was really herself before dementia had overtaken her. But even when she no longer knew who I or anyone else was, she was unfailingly polite, delighted to engage in conversation, and always the perfect hostess. She saved that was given to her at her confirmation more than 85 years ago. And I'll just say it was not hard to find it. She had a file for everything. Even one marked obituary, which I found a single sheet of yellow notepaper that said, "Don't call me a philanthropist. Just say that I am a very lucky woman who had two wonderful husbands, a terrific son, and the good fortune of being able to do some good in the world." Appearances mattered to her. She loved beautiful things and well-designed clothes. Years ago, she was thrilled to meet Cary Grant at a party at her brother Leighton's house where the actor was a house guest. She thought he was so well dressed that she slipped away from the party and found the room where he was staying and looked into his closet to see where his clothes were made. And from that day on, my father only wore suits from Dunhill Tailors. And yet, there was absolutely nothing superficial about her. She held herself to a high standard of conduct and expected the same of others. She believed there was a right way to do things, and that was how she wanted things done. And if they weren't done that way, you heard about it. She never hesitated to fire off letters to the CEOs of whatever companies had disappointed her in some way. Her willpower and determination were formidable. I had a call from the hospice nurse a couple weeks ago saying to come quickly because she was about to pass away. And as I started to make arrangements, I got a call the next morning from the same nurse who said, "No, you don't have to come. I've never seen anybody like her, but when I went to the house this morning, she was up and eating breakfast. She is a complete anomaly, and I have no idea when or if she will pass." And those of us who knew her just smiled and thought, yes, that's who she is. She was always active. She radiated energy. I remember as a child her coming home singing out loud. And she took on an endless series of projects for Tikkun Olam to repair the world. Many of the projects that the rabbi mentioned, and even things like planting trees on the rapid transit tracks on Shaker Boulevard, certainly working for Jewish education in the Jewish community, supporting universities in Israel, various kinds of medical research, and countless organizations that she supported. Every year she worked with the welfare department of Cleveland to provide Thanksgiving dinners to scores of families in need that could not afford them. Charitable work was her lifelong passion. And she had the courage to make things happen. She had read about Jean Lang's I Have a Dream program, and she decided to bring that program to Cleveland, adopting a class from the school that she had attended as a child in downtown Cleveland, finding mentors for each student, staying with them and supporting them through high school and college, and launching some very successful careers. She had a deep love for Judaism. When I was a young child, she taught me to say the Shema every night before going to bed. And she saw to it that I learned Hebrew and had a good Jewish education. She lit candles, and as the rabbi said, she attended services almost every week and observed all the holiday traditions. She also had a wonderful sense of humor, fed by countless shelves of books of jokes, and a healthy addiction to teaching bookatz. But just this week, my son Ben and I were going through a drawer of silverware, and we found some notes in her handwriting. One of them read, "Silver porridges. We hope Ben marries a lady who has as good taste not only in men but also in silver." Another box was labeled "Silver Demi-Tasse set. Mark doesn't want these, so I'm taking them with me." She did love to entertain, but lived modestly, never flaunted her wealth, although she certainly enjoyed fine restaurants and hotels. In fact, planning dinner was always the first order of the day, and we never finished a meal without having plans firmly in place for the next one. She was deeply devoted devoted to the men in her life. She loved and revered her father Sam and her brother Leighton. She married my father at age 21 and had nearly 40 years of loving marriage. And after he passed away, my father's best friend Chuck Evans introduced her to Leonard Schwartz. And she had almost another 40 years of loving marriage, much enhanced by an expanded family of Leonard's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And she embraced Leonard's family with the same love and care that she had devoted to my father and me. We gathered every Thanksgiving in a new family tradition that lasted for decades as the family grew. And she grew particularly close to Sandra and Bruce, who became like a brother and sister to me. And Leonard took wonderful care of her until he passed away at the age of 100 a year and a half ago. She cared deeply about family, caring for her ailing mother, visiting her uncles Paul and Harry, helping to support her cousin Rita, delivering Thanksgiving dinners to her cousin Lori and Susan Schiff. She took my children and me on countless trips, not just Palm Beach or New York, but Colonial Williamsburg and Europe and Israel. She tried hard to find ways to have fun with the children when they were young, and they didn't fully share her enthusiasm for 2-hour dinners in fancy restaurants. The alternatives did not come easy, but she worked at it, and we found a note of her plans for a visit with kids in New York, and the note said that she thought they might like Fuddruckers, but they don't take reservations. She never did quite figure out what young kids would enjoy, but they saw her effort and felt her energy and her love. And I know that she made a deep impression on my children, whom I see carrying on many of her best qualities. And she provided very generously for all of us, for which we will be deeply grateful all our lives. She was, of course, a profound and central influence in my life, and her loss is certainly not yet sunk in. She loved the theater, and that became a very important part of my life. And above all, my work in philanthropy and social impact comes directly from her commitment to our family foundations at Jinx.com. In both ways, good and bad, she made me the person I am today. Finally, I want to take a moment to thank the people who enabled her to thrive and do all the good things that she did in the world. Kathy Smith was her assistant for more than 30 years, and Sabrina Kurtzky also several decades. Kathy knew her very well. In fact, I had an email from Kathy this week where Kathy said, "My mother was an extremely generous woman when she saw fit." And I thought that perfectly balanced who she was. Michael Horvitz, on whom she relied for wisdom and guidance, and who selflessly devoted countless hours to helping her with the foundation and to carrying out her wishes for me and for my children. Larry Bartell, who was equally supportive in helping her manage her affairs and care for us. And of course, I have to thank our team of caregivers who for nearly a decade surrounded my mother with loving care, anticipated her every need, and understood thoroughly who she was and what would please her. When she was a mere 100 years old, I once asked her how she was, and she said she was content. And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I'm comfortable and I have nothing to worry about." And for that, I will always be indebted to Bridget Schiffer and her team, to Eleanor, who was with me when Mother passed, to Jackie, Amy, Renat, Barb, Erica, Annette, Ilana, Inha, Bowden, Andrew, Kimberly, and Olga, and others as well. In short, my mother had a wonderful life. It was filled with good fortune. She gave back to her family and to the world in equal measure the providence that she received. Her life was filled with close friends, loving family, good deeds, enjoyable pastimes, worldly travel, comfortable homes, and beautiful possessions. She enjoyed good physical health until the end, and she died very peacefully at home in her bed, holding hands with Eleanor and with me, without any pain or remorse. Hers was a life that any one of us would be fortunate to have. I love you.
We're now going to rise with the memorial prayer of the El Mole Rachamim. El Mole Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamatzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'malot Kedoshim, Utehorim, Kazor Rakia Masirim, Et Nishmat Zelda Bat Shmuel, Shalcha Lo Lama, Began Eden Te'emen Ufata, Anabal HaRachamim Hastireha, V'Seiter Kenofecha Leolamim, Utzror B'Tzrechem Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'Tanuach B'Sholom HaMishkava, V'Nomar Amen. May we remember all of the worthy and the righteous deeds that she performed while in the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life. God is now her portion. May she rest in peace. And we all say amen. We're now going to lower the casket and move into the burial portion of the service. We obviously want to offer our condolences to Mark and his family, and really to the Kramer family, the Schwartz families, and the Rosenfeld family. אדם מבין שנה יהיה ו1,000 שנים יחיה, מה יתרום לו? לא היה יהיה ברוך דיין אמת דוד ומחיה. דיין אמת שופט צדק באמת, ברוך דיין אמת שכל משפטיו צדק באמת, נפש כל חי בידיך, צדק מלא ימינך, רחם על פליטת צאן ידיך, ותמר למלא פרק ידיך. להגיד כי אשר אדוני צורי ולא עוולה טובה. אדוני נתן ואדוני לקח, יהי שם אדוני מבורך, והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, ירבה להשיב אפו, ולא יאיר כל חמתו. על מקומה תבוא ושלום. Thought to be a great mitzvah to be able to participate in every step of the care of a loved one through this last step. So by all means, take a shovelful. V'yashov ha'afar al haaretz keshahaya, v'haruach tashuv el Elohim asher nitana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the soul returns to God who gave it. Grant strength and grant comfort to those who are mourning. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God gives and God takes away. Blessed be the name of God. Does anyone else would like to take these moments? with the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Shemei, Rabbah, V'alma, Divrach, Dirute, V'amlich, Malchute, V'chayechon, V'yomechon, V'chayei, Devol, Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Uvizman, Kariv, V'yimaru, Amen. Yehei Shemei, Rabbah, Mivarach, Leolam, Uolne, Omaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitzadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal. Shemei v'kudisha b'rivhu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Namiran v'yalma v'yimaru. Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimaru. Amen. Oseh shalom v'yamav. U'ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamaru. Amen. At the conclusion of the mourner's Kaddish, we offer words of condolence. This is the first time you're hearing the greeting as new mourners. Hamakom yenachem etem b'tov sha'ar v'lei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you mourning today, together with all others who mourn in the house of Israel and in all of the world. And you will say, My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You have created it, you have fashioned it, you have breathed life into it, and you preserve it daily within me. There will come a day when you will take that soul away from me, but you will return it to me in the life to come. So long as the soul remains within me on this earth, I will continue to thank you for the blessings I am granted during my lifetime. O Lord my God, the God of my ancestors,